Right, hello folks. I did say that I would do another video on Ford Focus common issues. Now I've done obviously everything related to the interior and the engine running gear that I did in the last video, but I wanted to concentrate on what to look for in terms of front suspension. Now the front suspension on a Mark 1 is a Matheson strut. They've been around since what, the 70s, 60s, possibly even earlier than that, but most cars use them in the 80s, and to be honest with you, they give really good ride. It is a compromise ride, I have to say. I think it is a natural compromise between handling and comfort, but I would say in a Mark 1 you're pretty comfortable with these standard spring setup. It's only if you go for like an ST170 or an RS where it starts to become a bit more stiffer, but even an ST170 isn't really uncomfortable. They're quite well made. I did have I'm quite fortunate to come by these shock absorbers. These are only about 2 years old. I had them fitted about 2 years ago, and they're new old stock, so they've probably been sitting on the shelf for quite a few years. I couldn't tell the date, actually, to be fair. I think the date got rubbed off, but it was packed in 2019, so up until a few years ago they were still making these potentially. There's only a few areas to sort of keep an eye on. If you've got twin horns, just check that they do work, because sometimes they don't. A lot of cars, I'm not quite sure what spec, but certain cars got single horns. I think it could have been the lower spec cars, but I think most cars I've seen, most Mark 1s I've seen, have got twin horns, particularly in the UK anyway. Obviously automatic gearbox, quite obviously a little bit more common abroad and in America, but obviously over here it's not so much. I have put a copper lining from the other side of the car. This is one very long run through the car, and I'll show you. It goes under here and comes out through there, if you can see the line, and then I've put a union sort of there. Can you see where my finger is? There's a union. Oh, come on, focus in. I'm sorry, I've lost focus on that, but where my finger is down there, I have to put a union on, because that pipe, there we go, that pipe goes all the way through to the back and round by the master cylinder. It's one long run, because the ABS pump would normally sit down there, and it would be basically that pipe going into the ABS pump, and then a short one to that wheel. But I've got the long one, so when I made a new brake pipe, I just cut it in half and made my own to this wheel, which is quite easy enough, but it is something to be aware of, because they can rot out just in this piece. They generally only rot in this section, realistically, because obviously it's by the wheel, it's exposed to dirt, and it's a steel brake on. As soon as the coating, the paint coating comes off, it starts rusting. Brake hoses, if they haven't been done, do change them. I've changed mine in the last couple of years. They should be changed once every 8 to 10 years, I reckon. Don't quote me on that, but if they look a little bit rusty around the ferrules, I would change them. Don't take risks on that. Springs can break when they get old. Obviously these are new with the shock absorbers, but there's no real issues with that. They can break, but very rarely. I've seen them get really bad and they're still in one piece. If they do break, they just smash into here. It won't hit anything. In terms of the brake setup, it's a single piston setup, sliding calipers. Just be careful of the sliders. They can get a bit stiff with the grease that's been applied, particularly if the wrong grease has been put in. There should be silicone grease, not copper grease, because copper grease goes a bit stiff over time, and you'll find that this pad is wearing, but this one isn't wearing. I think as a natural design feature, the inner pads will always wear a little bit more than the outers, because the sliders don't always replicate the movement of the piston on this side of the caliper. It's just something to be aware of. Make sure when you're doing your brake pads, these hooks are sitting nicely on this round, you wire brush it back down. I have done a bit of stone chipping. I'm quite pleased the way it's actually stuck. These hubs, these sorry, what do you call them, swivel pillars or whatever you call them, they can rot a little bit, but I think it's cast iron, so it's just the outer skin really. If you're getting the shock absorber off, obviously you have to take the 3 bolts out on top. Don't undo the center one, that will cause problems. Take the top 3 out, and then this bottom bolt will have to come out. They can be a bit stiff because obviously it's a pinch bolt. WD-40, bit of a hammer, it should come out. Drop links are a common problem on many cars of this suspension system. Obviously you've got the anti-roll bar. This is a Lem Forder version. The cheap ones do not last. The bushes literally go after 2 seconds. The rubber just starts perishing, and the ball joints, obviously I've got water ingress and they start knocking. It can sound really bad when they go, so just be aware of that. I do apologise because I keep tilting the phone when I shouldn't be. Track rod ends, again I've changed the track rod ball joints. Just undo the locking up. You will need heat, you will need a blowtorch to get that off because they always seize. It's just where they are in the car. The inner track rods very rarely give issues, but they can go also. You will need a special tool to actually get that off because it's a smooth knuckle, but I would leave that to a garage who've got a tool for that, to be honest with you. The bottom ball joint, if I can just turn my camera around, and yeah, so we've got the bottom ball joint here. They can go, but the same, I've had a new arm put in. The inner bushes, now this is something to be very aware of. When these inner bushes wear, you can get this movement in and out, and I've known for it to get so bad that the drive shaft pulls out. The wheel literally moves so much this way that the drive shaft will literally pull out of the gearbox, or even the inner joint will just come apart. So make sure that there's no movement in these, and if your car goes in for an MOT and they say there's movement in these bushes too much, or it be an advisory or even a fail, it depends on how much movement, I would get it changed at the slightest sign of trouble, because you don't want to be replacing drive shafts if you can help it, because they are expensive as well. So you know, just get one thing sorted and not worry about it causing damage to everything else. That's what I will say. Wheel bearings can go on these. Touchwood, mine are okay, 90,000 miles and they're okay. But just make sure it's coated in grease, lots of grease around there. But they can go. You can get kits where you can sort of push them out of the hub itself, the swivel pillar itself. You have to take the drive shaft out and a few other things, but they're not too difficult to change if you've got a kit, but they do go and they can sound pretty bad. Nothing, to be honest with you, from this side. The other side is exactly the same. I've just taken, now obviously this is the passenger side, and we'd normally have the washer bottle sitting on this side of the car, just here. This is your electrical connection, where a lot of the electrics that go from the engine bay go into the fuse box just behind here. You've got your lighting and you've got your washer pump socket. Now these washer pump pipes that go to the washers at the front, they can break. I've known them to break through here where they actually go through there, but mine look in really good condition, so just something to be aware of. Now the other thing is that I discovered is, ignore the cable tie, that's just to hold the glue down on the pump, because there's a bit of insulation that is needed to hold it on. Where the pump goes through into, see, that's quite dirty, I might have to clean that. It does get corrugated screen wash, you wouldn't believe, but it does get a bit cloggy, and the reason was where it sits on the car. Okay, it sits like sort of like that on the car. this is where the pump goes. Now this is a filter. Now you can take this out and wash it out. Mine was absolutely clogged to death. I mean, I was surprised I was getting any water through them jets. I'm going to be strangely amazed at how powerful my jets are after this, because it was mostly blocked by corrugated screen wash over 20 odd years. I have cleaned that out and flushed it out to make sure there's no debris. There isn't. So if you've got washer jets that are really struggling and not powerful, yes, it could be the jets itself, they can get clogged up. There could be a blockage in the line, or there could be a pinhole in the line reducing pressure, but more likely it's that filter. And people just forget that there is actually a filter in there. They just think the motor bolts straight into the bottle, but actually that's not the case. So I think it would be worth getting the filter off and the pump off and getting that filter. It just pops off, that does. You might have to release the lines, but I'm doing a bit of underseeing at the moment, as you can see. You want to watch one of my other videos, pretty amateur videos. I wouldn't say I'm the best, but I'm learning. Try not to tilt the camera, because I think that might annoy the viewers. Everybody's going to be watching it with kink necks. But really, there isn't really much to say. I mean, just check the boots, but these boots are absolutely fine. I mean, I've never come across an issue with the boots splitting. Even the inner ones are good. The subframes can go a bit crusty along here. I mean, I've redone my subframe, but they can go a bit funny around this section where you don't see. But there really isn't anything much to check out, to be honest with you. I've just had to take the wing off, and looking at there's not hardly any corrosion. I've wired it back and there's absolutely nothing. So yeah, there's really nothing to say about this side other than what I've said. I mean, as I say, shock absorbers can leak as per normal cars, but the suspension is quite robust on these cars, particularly the front suspension. Very simple, there's nothing to it. As I say, just check the inner bushes of the wishbone, okay, the bottom arm. Make sure they don't move in and out too much, because, as I say, you don't want your drive shaft coming out. That would be really bad. That could cause a lot of damage to the gearbox, and then the gearbox, the oil seal, the drive shaft seal, and the gearbox could be ripped as well. So it's just another faff, but nothing really to look at, to be honest with you. Top mounts, oh yes, top mounts can go sometimes. So if you turn the steering and it sort of makes the steering feels gritty and you can hear that grinding sound, it might be this. It could be other things, but usually it could be this. Best practice when you're changing your spring or shock absorber is to buy another mount. They're cheap enough, and you don't have to buy genuine. You can go aftermarket. I've got an aftermarket one on. So I've got an aftermarket spring. I think it's Killen, and these are fine. They're correct to spec. They sit correctly and all that. Don't need to go to Ford. Ford will charge you 90 quid for one. Shock absorbers, I only got these because I could get them. They were about 50 quid a corner, but I suspect that was the rest of the stock. But aftermarket ones do exactly the same job. Monroe, KYBs are probably the best one to go for this car, for Mark 1 Focuses. Whatever, if it's a standard car, ST170, they've got the correct stuff. Yeah. And that's it really. Nothing really to say about the front suspension. There is something actually I could talk about, and it is the drive shaft. Now, if I could just... Right, see down there, directly below us, you have where the drive shaft, the long drive shaft to the driver's side, bolts on a bearing to the back of the engine block. Now, when that bearing can go at this age, and what I've found from a few people is when they go, they can make the sound of a wheel bearing that's actually gone. So if you are driving on the road and you think that you can hear a wheel bearing sound, disconnect the two bolts. There's two bolts that hold this on there, to the actual block itself. Just take the clamp off and just twist the bearing. The bearing is attached to the drive shaft, and just turn it around, and if it feels graunchy and noisy, then that's the problem. The issue is if it is the thing that's making the noise, you're going to have to replace the whole drive shaft, because Ford will not sell you that separately. It's just not possible. You can't fit it. So you would have to get a new drive shaft, which is an absolute arse and a waste, but I'm afraid that's what has to be done. So just to be aware. But yeah, absolutely nothing to really think about, to be honest with you. Okay, I will see you soon, guys, in another video. Bye bye.